Welcome to The Real with Joseph Labman. I am Joseph Labman. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of The Real, taking time out of your day to come watch this episode. I really appreciate that. If you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe for me. I'd really appreciate that as well. That's the best way you can support this channel and help me grow my content and grow this channel to where I'd like it to be. Everybody hit the like button for me on the way in on this video today. That also helps promote this video more in the algorithms, helps grow this channel more as well. Please share this content. I would really appreciate that. My guests would as well. If you would please share this episode with someone you know that maybe is interested in the topic we're talking about today. Please leave a comment below as well. We'd love to hear your guys' feedback. You can interact with myself and the guest on the panel and the live chat as well. Whatever we're talking about, just leave a comment there in the live chat. Pop in and say hello. We'll put it on the screen for you. And yeah, without further ado, let's get to the show. Welcome back to The Real with Joseph Labman. I am Joseph Labman. Hope you guys having a great Monday. Happy Monday to you guys. Welcome into The Real. Shout out to all new subscribers. And if you're new here, you haven't subscribed yet, please hit the subscribe button. It's a free, simple tap of the button. Really helps us go a long way. I really appreciate that. No subscription goes unnoticed, trust me. And hit the like button. Let's get a like rally on the way in here. But yeah, had a great live last night with my man Patrick Kinzel from Akron Hoban. Go check it out. We interviewed Pat. Also had on Deshaun Martin, aka Mr. Everything, aka Debo, who a Hoban alum, coached at Cincinnati, played at Cincinnati, coached there, and went on to Wisconsin. Now he's back at Hoban. So we had him on great live last night. Check that out. So, but wasn't planning on going live today, but then all of a sudden, breaking news, about an hour ago, 45 minutes to an hour ago, Kevin Stefanski has handed off play calling duties to Tommy Rees. And am I surprised by this? No. This was something that was rumored, before the bye week. But to actually see it happen to me says a lot, I think, because, Kevin Stefanski, I'm going to play his clip here in a second from his press conference today. But this is the second year in a row Kevin Stefanski's given up play calling duties. Last year, obviously, they had Ken Dorsey, and he gave up play calling duties midseason after Deshaun Watson got hurt. Then he gave up play calling duties. And so now this week after the bye, when the team is, 2-6 and the worst offense in the league, yet again, under Stefanski's play calling like last year, I only scored over 20 points one time and not looking great. You have a rookie quarterback now and Dylan Gabriel, who hasn't looked that great, hasn't progressed or got any better from week in to week out. You still have Shedeur Sanders, who's not getting any first team reps. Doesn't seem like he'll be on the field anytime soon the way how they've handled him in terms of, giving him reps and things like that. And then you trade away Joe Flacco, who is your captain and your starting quarterback, who you named before the season started. You had the whole quarterback circus in the summertime, which clearly didn't make any sense because they knew they were going to start Joe all along. They traded Kenny Pickett mid-camp. The whole thing was a waste of time. And Joe Flacco, who you traded away to the division rival, the Bengals, right now you can see there 4 games he spent here in Cleveland, only 815 yards, 2 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. 4 games with Cincinnati, 1,254 yards, 11 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. So a big difference already with Joe Flacco not being in Cleveland under this offense and Stefanski's play calling. He looks a lot better, and obviously, yes, he has Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, but I think you can just see there's just a different vibe with Joe Flacco. I think to me, it's not a coincidence he's better in that system. Yes, he has those receivers, but I think the play calling down there in Cincinnati is a lot better than what we've had here in Cleveland because they plugged in Joe Flacco through 4 games, and you see the results right there. I mean, that's pretty impressive. So it shows you Joe Flacco is still a guy who, like Stump Mitchell said, former Browns running back coach, still says that he's a guy that could throw the ball down the field. The offense Kevin was trying to run for Joe Flacco did not fit Joe Flacco. And that's something Stump has also said many times. And shout out to Stump Mitchell. When Joe was there 2 years ago, they did a much better job of pushing the ball down the field because that's Joe's strengths. This little rinky-dink, dink and dunk offense we've been running this year, especially when we had Flacco in there, it was a complete waste of time. You were wasting Joe's time. You're wasting the fans' time. You're wasting the players' time because we weren't doing what we should do. And what I mean by that is we weren't doing what we do well to our strengths. We weren't pushing the ball down the field ever. When have we thrown the ball deep this year really at all? Not a whole lot. I mean, I can't think of many plays. You look at the averages after every game this year, Dylan Gabriel or Joe Flacco, it's like they're averaging like almost 5 yards a throw. Usually you want 5 yards of carry for a running back, but we couldn't even throw the ball more than 5 yards down the field on an average for a lot of these games. That's how bad it's been. And so, not a coincidence to me that Joe Flacco's doing better, but also not a coincidence to me that for the second year in a row, we're handing off play calling duties yet again. And I'm going to listen to Kevin here for a second. We'll listen to Kevin rather. You guys may already heard us today. So here's Kevin Stefanski a little bit ago announcing that he's giving up play calling duties.
Obviously, with the first one coming up versus the Jets. Other thing on play calling, I'm going to have Tommy call the plays on offense. These are things that I'm always looking at. What can we do better? I have a ton of trust and faith in Tommy. He's more than capable. So excited for him. But bottom line is we have to just get better collectively. So that's offense, that's defense, that's special teams, that's players, that's coaches. So
it's always the same thing. Yeah, I'm handing out play calling duties, but we just always got to fun. We just got to be better. Just got to be better, right, Kev? Just got to be better.
That's our charge, and that's what we're working hard to do. And with that, I'll take any questions.
What led to that decision, Kevin, to turn over play calling?
Yeah, I look at everything, Jeff, every week. Certainly the bye week gives you an opportunity to look at everything, and bottom line is we have to be better. We have to be better in a lot of facets on the offensive side, and I just felt like Tommy is somebody that I believe in. Obviously hired him here a couple years back because I really believe in Tommy as a coach, and he's done everything that we've asked, and I just feel like this is the right time for this.
But here's what I don't understand there, Uncle Kev. Why 2 years in a row? And shout out my man Tori's in the chat. He said Kevin was forced to turn over play calling. Kevin will be fired. Shout out to you, Tori. Good to see you. But here's what I don't understand. Why 2 years in a row? You said, I like Tommy Rees. I believe in Tommy Rees. I kept him around here for a reason and blah, blah, blah. All the things you just said. But you had Ken Dorsey last year when Tommy Rees was here as your tight ends coach. You had Ken Dorsey in the building, and you turned over play calling back then too. So 2 years in a row, you decide maybe I'm not good enough. I can't do it. So you didn't learn your lesson from last year, and you took zero accountability for that. So then now we're going to come back next year and say, you know what? Maybe I should give up play calling. I don't believe it. I think what Tori said there in the chat is correct. I think this is definitely something that was forced upon Kevin Stefanski. Obviously, he's going to say the correct thing, PC, publicly, that he did it and blah, blah, blah. The same stuff we heard last year. I'm sure, I guarantee if I went and got the clip of when he announced Ken Dorsey calling plays last year to this year, they're probably identical. Hell, he might be wearing the same hat and hoodie as well, the same demeanor, everything. And so, again, we all know what time it is in Berea. Kevin Stefanski and this whole analytical scheme, as I call it, led by Paulie Podesta, Andrew Berry, and the whole thing, this is what they do. This is what they've done. Rather, they want to sit there and act like Kevin's making all the calls, and we're all a team effort. We're all this. We've always heard they're all one. They all think alike and everything, and they make decisions the same. But I just don't understand. 2 years in a row, you've given up play calling duties. What does that say about you? And I've said all along, I've always thought Kevin cannot manage play calling and being a head coach. People don't realize what goes into that. Being a play caller requires you to spend a lot of time with your quarterback during the week. You have to be in those meetings offensively, and you have to really be dialed into that. I think as a play caller too, you can have a lot of emotion. You have to be. That's why a lot of them go up in the box and sit up behind glass, up at the booth. So they can just sit and be locked in, laser focused, and not having the emotions of the stadium or anything, feeling that. That's why they sit behind glass upstairs, right? And they get the bird's eye view. But a head coach, he manages everything. He's the CEO of the team. He has to deal with there's a lot of things, a lot of things on a head coach's plate throughout the week that they have to manage and go through. And I've never thought Kevin to me can manage both of those things. He just seemed like a guy who can't do it. And I think last year kind of showed that when he gave up the play calling duties, the offense looked a little better. They were able to score a little more points. There seemed to be a little more creativity, a little more attention to detail, right? Deshaun Watson wasn't playing quarterback. They had Jameis Winston, and I know it's a narrative a lot of people have already pumped out today that now we're going to find out what it really is. But I think we knew what it was last year. It wasn't just, Deshaun Watson not playing quarterback. And why did he give up play calling as soon as Deshaun was done for the year? I mean, think of that. Why did he do that at that time? Because to me, it's kind of like you were just throwing in the towel for the season. Like, well, Deshaun's not playing. Our season's over with. The $200+ million investment we made, right? The whole air raid scheme that I put on the screen many times. It has him back in 2021. Started to influence more of the organization that he wanted. More air raid scheme. And this was written by Jonathan Jones of CBS Sports. And I also have the other one as well. I'm going to pull it up here in a second. Back then as well, written at that time. This was from Tony Grossi. It said, Paul DePodesta's approach convinced owner Jimmy Haslam the only way to build a Super Bowl team is by consistently throwing for explosive plays in the passing game, apparently no matter the weather conditions. Went on to say that Stefanski and AVP insist that their system is rooted in the running game. But as the only extent that the Browns desire an effective running game, essentially to set up a play-action passing game, eventually they want those play-action passes to be more frequently laden with deep shots downfield, and that is where Deshaun Watson came in. The bottom line is Stefanski's job is safe because he is completely adhering to DePodesta's advanced statistics or analytics models and not resisting them. Disagreeing with or rejecting DePodesta's research will be Stefanski's quickest ticket out of town. He is smart enough to know that. And then we get to where we are today. He gives up play calling yet again. So what do I think all this means? I think like Tori hit on there in the chat, I think Kevin was forced to make this decision over the bye week. I don't think Kevin really wanted to do it. I think this is another date into the analytical scheme. This whole thing they've been running since 2016. You've seen the graphic going around this week, going viral on Twitter of Paul DePodesta. They're 56, I believe, and 90, or is it 56, I believe, and 90, or 55, 99, and 1 since he's been the chief strategy officer here and since 2016. But, some people out there say, well, he wanted Sean McDermott and he wanted this. And I think there's massive evidence that he's not that involved, which I think is crazy. I think that's anybody who writes that in these comments, I really question are you DePodesta's burner account? Allegedly, I think that's is that who that is? Is that his burner account? Is that people in the organization? Because there's a massive amount of evidence that this guy's involved with everything. And the whole reason, like Tony Grossi pointed out in that article back in 2021, and then you saw Jimmy Haslam come out with the Jonathan Jones article saying that he wants a more air raid attack, and it kind of adds up there. It seems to me that, Kevin Stefanski only, had the play calling duties because he was adhering to the advanced statistics, the analytical scheme, as I called it. And so that scheme now to me is over, because why would you make this change now, right? Why would Kevin Stefanski give up play calling duties now if his job was safe, right? If his job was truly safe and, this is just a year to evaluate, why would he give up play calling duties now? He wouldn't, because I think today's signals, and to me, we got one step I don't say once, we're many steps further throughout the season, but I think we got a lot closer today to this being Kevin's last season here in Cleveland. And really, I wouldn't be surprised that, honestly, the whole regime today is one step closer from being out of here at the end of the year. Because I think this was Jimmy Haslam purely that made this decision. I think Jimmy Haslam, came into the season knowing that they weren't going to be a playoff team, but I think Jimmy probably, based on how he spoke in his preseason press conference, and I think what he wanted to see out of this group, because he gave him the benefit of doubt for this one more year. He came out and took acknowledgement for the Watson trade being a disaster and everything, and he said big swing and a miss. But I think Kevin tried to give him the benefit of the doubt. But as bad as it's not that they're 2-6, and that they expected not to be great this year, but it's how they've lost too. I mean, you have a great defense, right? And you have a great defense led by one of the greatest defensive ends that we've seen in the last 30 years, really, or how long you can go back a lot. I mean, Myles Garrett could definitely be in Canton one day, who had a career game against the New England Patriots the last time you guys went out and performed on a field before the bye, had 5 sacks in a game, and at the end of the game was slamming his helmet because he was so pissed off, and said after the game, I would give up all 5 of those sacks for team success. And this is a guy you just paid an assload of money to in the offseason who wanted out of here and requested a trade, but you said, no, we'll give you the money. Please don't leave. And he's not going to deny that kind of money because he wouldn't have got that anywhere else ever. But especially the guarantee money. But but that guy gets upset, and you hear some of the comments Myles has said recently in the media, and it's kind of eye opening. That to me, that I don't think Myles And you heard what Jerry Jeudy said, when they traded Joe Flacco, basically kind of reiterated like what was the whole circus in the summer then. I mean, you heard a lot of these players recently slowly drop a little things, little hints that I think that locker room's kind of turned on Kevin. I think they like Kevin, but I don't think they respect Kevin. And I think that's showing. And today, to me, was the nail in the coffin because I just don't see why would he give up play calling if his job was safe. He's supposed to be the quarterback guru. He's supposed to be the guy that develops quarterbacks. He had this offensive mind from not San Francisco, from Minnesota. That's why you hired him. The whole reason why they advertised hiring Kevin Stefanski, why he was the hot boy coordinator back in 2020, 2 years in a row was shown it's not true. And he's had every quarter. He had Baker Mayfield. He didn't like Baker, according to Stump. He didn't really Stefanski and Baker just never really meshed. And eventually they ran Baker out of town. They made it like Baker Mayfield was just some crap quarterback. And look at Baker Mayfield now. Was it 5 years later or 4 years later since they ran him out of town? He looks like a top 5 quarterback in the NFL right now. Some people even say number 1 so far this season. So you ran him out of town. You brought in little over the water guys, retreads, Jacoby Brissett, all these guys, Case Keenum, all these guys who, nobody expected them to be a franchise quarterback. He made it work with them because they can go out there and run a basic offense. And you had Nick Chubb at the times, who Nick can bail you out of a lot of games because you could just hand the ball to him when the offense was stagnant. He can get things going. But even back then, though, with Nick Chubb, Nick Chubb never averaged 20 carries per season ever under Kevin Stefanski. He never averaged 20 or more carries for a season, which is insane. And we all know how good Nick Chubb was in his prime. I mean, this guy, he was up there with Jamal Charles and Jim Brown and one of the average yards per carry. I think it was like 5 something. It was over 5. But, we never gave more than 20 carries per season. That's insane. And again, I just wonder, you look at this guy, and then they bring in Deshaun Watson. Yes, Deshaun Watson wasn't good here, but I think a lot of reasons, in my personal opinion, why Deshaun truly wasn't good here, you knew what you were getting with the guy. You knew he hadn't played in 18 months or however long it was. It was a long time, almost over a year since he had played his last game in Houston. But last time he was on the field in Houston in 2020, he looked like a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. He looked like Houdini out there. Yes, he went through all the things mentally, and I think a lot of his problems here were mental because I think his confidence wasn't there. And I think, he had just all the stuff he went through, what he's being accused of, the allegations, the lawsuits, I think that all added up to him. But you knew what you were getting when you interviewed the guy, right? You're the ones that flew out to Texas to sit down with him in a room, interview the guy before you were convinced you can give him $250 million or whatever, almost $250 million fully guaranteed. You're the ones that sat in that room. And it's your job as a head coach to take a guy, no matter where he is, to build him up, put him in a system that's rooted around his skill sets and what's best for him. And you never did that. You never did. And Stump Mitchell, who was in the building, I trust Stump's opinion on this, said he even said it. He goes, Kevin Stefanski never built a proper system never called plays around Deshaun. He wanted Deshaun to adhere to his system and how he wanted it done. Basically, you got to fit in and be square or fit in, or just get the hell out of here, basically, or you just won't be good. Be there, be square. You like to say that's kind of how it was with the run. Deshaun fitting that system. He had no. I mean, it was crazy. I just don't think it was all Deshaun Watson. That's what I'm getting at. I just think Deshaun Watson was poorly coached here. Honestly, he was not properly coached. And you brought in a guy, and Ken Dorsey, and the whole reason why you fired all those guys was because of Deshaun Watson, because you weren't impressed with his development through those couple of years you had him, or the 1 year you had him. So you fired, right, Alex Van Pelt. You fired Stump Mitchell. You basically let Bill Callahan just go out the door. And you brought in Ken Dorsey. And all we were told by all the people in the local media that constantly defend these people was that, they brought in Ken Dorsey and they built everything around Deshaun. And they brought in Ken Dorsey, who had a completely different philosophy than Kevin Stefanski. Completely different. More of an air raids guy, passing, more of a passing game guy than run first guy. That's what Ken Dorsey came from, former quarterback himself. So it all made sense at the time when they brought in Ken Dorsey. You're thinking, okay, I see what they're doing here. Although it was kind of odd they fired Alex Van Pelt, after they just had that season they had in 2023 with 4 different quarterbacks and your 4th string left tackle, and you fired the offensive staff. What sense did that make? And you remember what Albert Breer said at that time, and I'm going to pull that up here right now because that, to me, I just keep going back to that, what Albert Breer said that day. When they fired Alex Van Pelt, he was hired in New England. He went on the local radio there in Boston, 98.5, the sport, and shout out to them. But I'll never forget this because ever since this report and those firings, the Browns' offense has never been the same, right? But why did they truly fire him or fire these guys? Because it didn't make any sense when you look back at it now. And here's the clip again from Albert Breer. Remember this, and I'm going to get to my bigger point here in a second.
So in Cleveland, the reason he was let go in Cleveland was because ownership and Paul DePodesta, not Kevin Stefanski, ownership and Paul DePodesta were frustrated with the progress Deshaun Watson had made. I don't think that they really, truly, the people who made that decision really, truly knew his value to that staff. And other people on that staff, not so much Kevin, but people below him, were floored when they fired him for 2 reasons. Number one, how do you fire the offensive coordinator after you just won 11 games with 4 different quarterbacks, with your 4th and 5th tackles, without Nick Chubb?
Including at least 2 or 3 of those guys that nobody's ever heard of, right? I mean, you're talking about Jeff Driscoll, P.J. Walker, Dorian Thompson-Robinson. Like, those are some of the guys he was working with.
So you just went through that, right? I mean, Zoe, how often do you see teams survive losing 1 tackle, let alone 3? They lost their first 3 tackles for the year.
Yeah, usually don't. I mean, look at the New England Patriots this year. You really had no tackles. There's no tackle depth. There's no tackle depth across the league, period.
Yeah.
And he was able to help build an offense that was able to sustain with Joe Flacco coming off the couch, with their 4th and 5th tackles, without Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt coming back in. So there's that. Like, that I think is one reason why people there were floored that he got fired. The other one I think is the real key, though. He was the glue of that staff. Kevin, if you know him, he's a great guy. He's not the most outgoing guy. He's just sort of like his personality is very dry. He's got a good sense of humor, but he's not like this outwardly gregarious guy. Alex was the one that held that staff together. When guys were coming out, when guys were going in, he is a guy who was a unifying force in that building.
So you hear what he said there. He was the unifying force in that building. Not the head coach, who should be that, who I think should be outgoing and should have a personality if you're going to be a head coach. That's just my opinion. But, even Bill Belichick, as dry as he was publicly, I think behind the scenes guys knew who Bill was. Bill was angry a lot of times, lightning the guys in meetings. But, I don't think I never heard Bill described in that manner at that, behind the scenes like that. But maybe publicly, but not like that. But anyways, going back to my main point with all this, why I think this is a bigger indictment, not only on Kevin Stefanski today, but really just on this whole regime. And mainly it's him, Paul DePodesta, and Andrew Berry, the analytical scheme. The analytic scheme is what I call it. I think it's over for these guys. Again, they're the ones that wanted Deshaun Watson. Yes, Jimmy Haslam said he went for it as well. But if you look at all the articles I showed you today, going back to what, Tony Grossi said back there in 2021. You remember what Stump Mitchell said about how Kevin Stefanski and then Baker Mayfield really just didn't get along. And then you come out around that same time, and you hear the reports from Jimmy Haslam, from Jonathan Jones. And I'm going to put that on the screen in case you guys don't remember that. Right here. This is from back in when was this? This was in 20. Let me go to Google here. I'm on something else here. But this, to me, if you look, again, it all adds up if you really look at it. Air raid scheme, right? Let me see here. Jonathan Jones. And I think if you put it all together, it all adds up. Right here, 2022. Here we go. Day before Christmas. And CBS Sports. Let me get it on the screen for you guys. A lot of you guys who've watched my channel have seen this before. So again, remember what Stump said. Him and Baker didn't really get along like that. Baker eventually got pushed out of town. You saw what Tony Grossi wrote, right? How DePodesta convinced owner Jimmy Haslam you need to have more of an air raid attack. You got to throw the ball more. even though they had Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt at the time and they dominated the running the ball in 2020. Now let's just forget about that, right? Let's move on to throwing the ball more down the field. And you can see right here, there could well be coaching staff change this offseason for the Browns, and there could be some tweaks into the offensive philosophy as well. Team owner Jimmy Haslam is a University of Tennessee alumnus who has closely watched the air raid offense the Volunteers have installed to great success. And then went on to talk about how the Browns had the most rushing yards in the league at that point. But, let's throw the ball more. We got Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, and at a time, a younger offensive line who was one of the best in the league. But now let's air it out more. We need to throw the ball more and not play to our strengths. Let's not give Nick Chubb more than 20 yards or 20 carries per average for a season when he averaged over 5 yards a carry for his career. Now, let's not do that. Let's throw the ball more to Jerry Jeudy, who drops it a lot, Cedric Tillman, Jamari Thrash, Anthony Schwartz, all the plethora of receivers we've had here. Elijah Moore, who we traded for a second-round pick. Didn't re-sign him into a second contract here. All those guys. Let's just throw them the ball. I mean, it's insane. Again, I think today could be the end for these guys. Because why would if their jobs are really safe, if Kevin Stefanski's job was safe, why would he give up play calling for the second year in a row? Because this doesn't look good on Kevin. And because, again, had he not done this last year, nobody would be saying anything today to this extent that this is a big indictment on them. But the fact that he did this again 2 years in a row, to me, says a lot about what's really going on behind the scenes right now. And that is, I just think Haslam is kind of over these guys. I think he's letting it ride out to the end of the year. I think at some point he's going to make a change. I think he's going to clean house. I think that's where it's heading. You heard if you listened to All the Cleveland Sports Show last Friday, I believe it was a Thursday, shout out to them. They had Zach Jackson on weekly. Zach's very plugged in from The Athletic. Very nice guy. I've met before back in the day, 10 years ago. But Zach's very plugged in. And Zach Jackson even said last week that he believes that there's no way they bring this regime back by the end of the season, that he just doesn't see it now. He wasn't like that at the beginning of the season, but he said he flipped recently because I just don't see how you can run this back again next year. And I think he's right. And I think a lot of that, too, in my opinion, is from, again, I think the locker room is telling you, led by Myles Garrett. You heard what Jerry Jeudy said when they traded Flacco. And then you see what Flacco's doing down there in Cincinnati as well. Again, through 4 games, we have a sample size now. I think it's all very telling where this is going. And I think Tommy Rees is going to get a shot now to show what he can do at the NFL level as a play caller. And, we'll see what happens. Chantel, good to see you. If Dylan loses to the Steelers at home, he will be booed out that stadium in 2 weeks. I agree with that. Or there'll be Shador. We want Shador. Good to see you, brother. My man from Chicago. I wonder why they switched the play caller today, not last week. What's being proven here? B Skrills, good to see you. Salute Joseph, salute chat, salute to you, B Skrills. Always good to see you, brother. Light brown and lovely, and hopefully fired soon. Yeah, I think that's where it's heading. Light brown and lovely. Thanks for tuning in. But again, and along with all this today as well, again, they brought in Deshaun, or I mentioned that you look at all the quarterbacks they've had here, right? He didn't mesh well with Baker Mayfield, ran Baker out of town. They went out and got Deshaun Watson. They brought Deshaun here and said, hey, Deshaun, we know what your skill set is. You haven't played in a year, but you got to fit into our offense or else your ass can just get out of town. Kick rocks, basically. We're not going to build an offense around you, fit in or be square. And that's that. So, and then, they went out and drafted not 1, but 2 quarterbacks this year. And you brought back Joe Flacco and you signed Kenny Pickett in the preseason. And you traded Kenny Pickett for the season started. You traded Joe Flacco after 4 games because you really didn't build an offense around him either for his strengths like you did in 23. And then, we get to Dylan Gabriel, who is an undersized quarterback and probably one of the worst 3rd-round picks we've seen in a while, and he hasn't progressed at all. And Shador Sanders, who you took in the 5th round, has not gotten any first-team reps, but he's a snap away from going out on the field. Hasn't got any first-team reps, but he's a snap away from going out on the field. It doesn't make sense. I think their whole plan blew up in their face. Again, this scheme to me, these group of gentlemen right here, their whole plan was tied to one man, and his name was Deshaun Watson. And I know Jimmy Haslam came out and said, I'm the one that pushed it, blah, blah, blah. They were all in on it. And Stump Mitchell said he was in the building at that time. Everybody in the building agreed that this was the move to make. No hesitations, nothing. All Haslam had to do was just get the money right. And he did. He got him convinced to go here. Because remember at that time, during that week, it was not only the Browns were pursuing Deshaun heavily, but it was the Saints, the Falcons, and the Carolina Panthers. And Deshaun Watson told them no initially, beginning of that week. He told them, no, I'm not coming. I don't want to go to Cleveland. He was out on them. And a lot of people thought it was a done deal to Atlanta. He was even seen that week with a Falcons jacket on publicly. But Haslam came in and said, well, here's $230 million guaranteed. He said, well, I can't pass up on that. Right? Myles Garrett, the same thing. Myles Garrett told you, I want the hell out of here. I don't want to be in Cleveland anymore. Get me out of here. I'll be traded. And he even went on the media tour and said he ain't changed his mind. He ain't backing down. He was even talking about what he's looking for in the team and everything. And then here comes Haslam. Well, we'll give you all this guaranteed money, Myles. I'll just buy you back in. And Myles said, well, I can't pass up on that. But Jimmy Haslam has a problem here because the Deshaun Watson trade blew up, and the other investment he just made in Myles Garrett, the two biggest investments they've made financially in the last 5 years since these three guys have fully taken over once they ran Dorsey out of town. Well, not the two guys. They didn't run Dorsey out of town, but the other guy in the end on the right there. Yeah. Dorsey, you can get out of here. He convinced Haslam to get him up out of here. So, but, their whole thing has failed. But again, they have their other financial investment. Myles Garrett is already being rumored for trade rumors after 1 year, and not even a full year after he signed the contract extension. And yes, that's very complicated and everything. And although you heard Albert Beard earlier in the week, if you saw it on the local radio, there is a path where they could trade him in the offseason, and he does have a no trade clause. And I know they said the other day they're going to come out and say we're not trading no matter what, blah, blah, blah. But Jimmy Haslam's smart enough to know you can't have a guy that you paid that much money to be this upset and pissed off. Because at the end of the day, you're probably not getting out of that contract anytime soon. I mean, unless you, in my opinion, Jimmy's going to have to choose. Do I want to stick with these guys, or am I going to trade Myles Garrett and give these guys more draft picks? We're already going back to Operation Stockpile. We have how many 5th and 6th round picks do we have already this year that we've acquired from trades and stuff? Just can't have enough of them. We know we never hit on many of them. We just got to have them, And yes, this draft was a little better. Quinshon Judkins looks like a home run. Schweitzenberger looks like a home run. Fannin looks like a home run. But you kind of look at the draft strategy, though, in itself. Yes, they hit on 3 picks, but, Dylan Sampson at this point has made no impact really in this team this year because a lot of times he doesn't get the ball or doesn't get put in the game. Week 1 we used him because we had to. He looked great, and I just haven't really seen a whole lot of him since because I don't think he's been utilized. And then you took Dillon Gabriel in the 3rd round. And then you followed it up with Shador in the 5th round after you already took a quarterback. You took 2 quarterbacks. You didn't take a single offensive lineman, not a single receiver. You didn't even take a free safety, which you could have used. But mainly receiver and O-lineman. You didn't take a single one. So to me, this draft, they came into the season after the first, couple 4 games and stuff to really, you heard the people in the media that constantly defend these guys, pumping up the draft. It's the greatest draft ever and blah, blah, blah. He's safe. But what about all the other drafts? Because I know people have done all these videos and all this stuff about how he's really not as bad as a draft, his draft picks aren't as bad as we thought, blah, blah, blah. Their draft picks have been terrible for the most part. They haven't been that good. I mean, look at 2020, okay, you hit JOK, you got that one. That was a home run, but I can't remember anybody else from that draft. Greg Newsom, we just traded. 2021, and that was 2021. 2020 was Grant Delpit, which wasn't I'd say a good pick, right? So you got Delpit, you got let me write it down. You got Delpit, you got JOK in 2021. In 2022, I can't remember anybody who is I can think off the top of my head from that draft that's made a big impact. 2023, and feel free to put in the comments here if you're watching who was the guy in 2023 that was the big play, pick that we made because we didn't have a 1st or 2nd round pick. I can't think of one. And then in 2024, we took Mike Hall, who has not been on the field this year because of injuries so far. And I can't think of anybody else. I mean, Alex Wright, I'll give you Alex Wright. He was a good pick. Isaiah McGuire looks like a nice pick. I'll give you that. And again, I'm thinking off the top of my head right now. I'm sure some people in the comments will put, some other players they think are decent and are good picks. But overall, though, if you look at it, it's not been great. right? And mainly your higher end picks, like your 2 first-round picks you made, Greg Newsome and Jed Wills, aren't even on your team anymore. And here's the thing about the Jed Wills thing. Bill Callahan at that time told them he wanted Tristan Wirfs, who was drafted a couple picks after Jed Wills, and the path that Tristan Wirfs is on right now looks like as long as he stays healthy, he could be a Hall of Famer one day if he stays on the track he's on. He went into Tampa, helped them win a Super Bowl year 1. He's been an All-Pro. I think he had the lowest pressures given up last year according to PFF. Tristan Wirfs is one of the best offensive linemen in the league. That's who Bill Callahan wanted. And they told Bill Callahan the week of that draft, leading up to that draft, yeah, we'll take him. And they ended up taking Jed Wills instead. And then look how things have unfolded since. Eventually, Bill Callahan, who was still under contract here when they fired Van Pelt and Stump, they didn't have to let him out the door, but they let him go out the door for a reason. And I said it at the time, and I said this last year. When they made those moves after 2023, because there was no justification to fire that offensive staff after what they did in that 23 run, right? But you heard what Albert Beer said. It was all tied around one investment, Deshaun Watson. Okay? And so regardless of what these guys did in 2023, which it's kind of crazy, the 2 years they actually made the playoffs were the years that, it seemed like we actually played decent football because we were doing things the right way. But you fired those guys and you brought in Ken Dorsey and a whole new staff to allegedly build around Deshaun Watson. But the guy you brought in, you didn't let him call the plays until after Deshaun Watson was hurt. Then you handed off play calling duties. And everybody in the media spun it as well. Jameis Winston, he was just so much better than Deshaun. And that's why they looked a little better, not because of the play calling. Don't forget about that. Don't focus on that. Just focus on Jameis. It's all Deshaun's fault. It's all Deshaun's fault, blame for. And it's worst trade in history and everything, and and it's funny when people say that they blame it on Deshaun. It's like at the end of the day, these guys are still the ones that made the trade. They're the ones that sat in the room with him, like I said earlier. They're the ones that interviewed him. They're the ones that should have known better. They're the ones that are responsible, especially you as the head coach, Kevin, and Andrew Berry, to build a team around to support your quarterback. You remember these two guys in the end here, Berry and DePodesta in 2022, just said the hell with defensive tackle. We don't need defensive tackles. And we got ran all over that season. What team trying to win doesn't have at least a starting caliber 3 tech? You have to stop the run. And teams ran the ball over us that year. These guys are constantly coming up trying to be the smartest people out there, and yet they make the dumbest decisions over and over again. And they're constantly trying to patch up all their mistakes and put the spin cycle out in the media, trying to change everything up. It's a joke. It's an absolute dumpster fire. And I think today should be the nail in the coffin, like I said, because, again, you guys have had your chance. Your whole plan was the analytical air raid attack, which I showed today with Deshaun Watson, and you failed. You failed. It blew up in your face. And I think Jimmy has him now. I think this move today was, like I said earlier, was I surprised by it? No. But it is still kind of surprising because when I think about it, all the things I pointed out today, I'm just like, man, I just, why would he give up play calling if his job was safe 2 years in a row? Again, had he not done it last year, I wouldn't be saying this, but the fact that he did it 2 years in a row and you didn't get, the fact that they didn't give up play calling, if you brought in Ken Dorsey to build around Deshaun, Ken Dorsey had a completely different philosophy than Kevin, right? It's like I always used to use this analogy when I used to talk about this last year. Kevin Stefanski is like an Italian chef, right? He's been working at Luigi's for his whole 40 years, whatever. For 25 years, he's been working at Luigi's. That's all he knows is Italian recipes, right? And that's what he knows. But then we brought in a guy, Ken Dorsey, who worked at a Mexican restaurant, El Pancho's, wherever, for 25 years. And that's all he knows is those ingredients, right? And that, 2 different cultures, 2 different recipes, right? Yeah, they use the same products, but it's different philosophies, right? But that's allegedly we brought in the Mexican chef to build around Deshaun, right? But you didn't let him call the plays for Deshaun until Deshaun was hurt. And then what was the point? Because Deshaun wasn't out there. But yet the offense still looked better. I don't get it. These guys, the reason why Kevin Stefanski didn't let go of the play call until Deshaun was out of there because Deshaun was their investment. And it was really that guy there on the far right through that guy in the middle, down to the chain of command of the coach, through that chain right there. It starts with that guy there on the right on the screen. It's his philosophy leaking down in the field, invading everything. And today, to me, it blew up in their face. It's over. The nail's in the coffin. I think, and here's my second point with all this today, why I think this is a bigger thing happening today than to just hand it off play call. Why I think this is going to be the end for these guys at the end of the season, and why today, to me, signals that. Tony Grossi also went on ESPN this morning, ESPN Cleveland, rather. And you can see right here, it says on ESPN Cleveland, shout out to the Dogs on Facebook. Great podcast. They always put out good content. They posted this. It says on ESPN Cleveland, Tony Grossi said, quote, he thinks Dillon Gabriel will start Sunday against the Jets in New York on Sunday. Tony Rizzo couldn't contain his excitement. He asked Grossi if the Browns could seriously consider starting Shedeur Sanders. He said, quote, it's possible. I wouldn't rule it out, end quote. Grossi also said the decision isn't Kevin Stefanski's, but rather it'll be up to the committee, Jimmy Haslam, Andrew Berry, and Paul DePodesta. But I think really it's going to come down to the first guy there, Jimmy Haslam. Jimmy Haslam, in my opinion, is the one who took Shedeur Sanders. You saw his family on the sideline 2 weeks ago with the Shedeur jerseys on. And we saw Stefanski and Berry's reaction when they took Shedeur Sanders. They didn't look very happy. Clearly, their guys and everybody in the national people nationally are now saying this that Dillon was their guy. That's the guy they wanted, right? Was Stefanski, Berry, DePodesta. And DePodesta, I know people they don't like hearing his name. What does he do? Stop bringing up Boogeyman. Can't talk about him. Yet he sits right next to Andrew Berry the whole draft. If you go watch every pick from nights 1 through 3, DePodesta sits right next to Andrew Berry. I mean, in lockstep, going over the players, everything. And he's the first guy that was out there in 2020 when we took Jed Wills when we weren't supposed to take him because Bill Callahan said take worse. We still took Wills. Remember that? He was the first guy talking to the media then and saying they got the guy they wanted all along, even though that wasn't the guy you guys really wanted all along. The guy that in the building actually knew offensive line. But I guess, DePodesta and his T-84 calculator, they know more about offensive line play than Bill Callahan does. Again, wonder why they let Bill Callahan out the door. Didn't try to stop him from leaving because he didn't go along with their bullshit. That's why. Again, we've seen the proof is in the pudding with these guys. It's undeniable. Anybody who says otherwise, I don't know what the hell you're looking at. Do some more research. It's the analytical scheme. But going back to Shedeur, I think that was Haslam's pick, and I think they've treated Shedeur the reason why I think they've treated Shedeur the way they have is for two reasons. I think number one, it wasn't their guy, and they're more invested in Dillon Gabriel. I mean, at one point in training camp, they had Shedeur Sanders throwing to equipment staff guys. Think of that. You're really invested in, but you got him thrown to the guy who's bagging up all the equipment and stuff at the end of the practice and getting all the cones off the field. He's thrown to that guy who probably hasn't caught a pass in 10, 15 years. I mean, what the hell was that? And then, again, he hasn't gotten a single first-team rep, and he's one snap away from going in the game. And I don't think Stefanski ever really wanted to trade Joe Flacco. Why would you trade Joe Flacco? It's the guy it's like what Mike Tomlin said. Why the hell would you trade a guy you named your starter before the season, right? Why would you trade him? And he was a team captain in the middle after 4 games to a division rival for a 5th-round pick. Only because I think the owner said so. And maybe DePodesta still is in his ear because it kind of is the Moneyball scheme. You think about it. Remember the movie Moneyball, built around Paul DePodesta, and that philosophy was, he had a guy he wanted to play at first base, I believe it was, and the coach said no, so they traded the guy the coach wanted to keep in there, so that he had no other reason but to play the guys he wanted to play. Very medieval. And I think that maybe that's played out here. But I don't think it's solely DePodesta. I think Jimmy Haslam wants Shedeur to play. Because Jimmy Haslam's the one that came out before the season and told the media, oh, yeah, we're going to see both of them play this year. No coach would ever say that. But the owner said it before the season. right? Jimmy Haslam came out and said, no, we're going to see Shedeur play this year. We're going to see what we got because we got 2 first-round picks next year, right? And you hear a lot of the rumors about before the season that Jimmy Haslam's eyeing certain quarterbacks in the draft, right? Nick Saban's being involved, right? Jimmy Sexton, the agent. There could be regime change in Cleveland. I think, in my opinion, I think Jimmy Haslam's mind's always been set on something else. I think he gave these guys the benefit of the doubt to start the season to see what they could do if they could, muster up something. But they ain't mustering up shit. They're 2-6. They're garbage. They're the worst offense in the league, and it's a team they built and put together. I think Haslam's over it. I think today, given the play calling to Tommy Rees, Tommy, let's see what you can do. Tommy Rees to me was the guy. If you watch practice and training camp, he's the guy that worked with Shedeur the most. He's the guy that was seen to be more interested in developing Shedeur, worked with him more hands-on, comes from the college ranks. I think Tommy and Shedeur would do really well together. And I've said all along, I would not put Shedeur out there until they change play callers to Tommy Rees. And go back to last year. When did Kevin Stefanski give up play calling? When Deshaun Watson was out for the year and he wasn't going to play anymore. Then he said, okay, here you go, Ken Dorsey. You can call plays for Jameis Winston because Jameis wasn't his guy. Deshaun was their guy because that's the guy they invested in, right? So is the same thing happening now? I think this report right here, it's possible that he could start Sunday. And I think after what happened, I saw this an hour before they announced the play calling duty switching to Tommy Rees. I think it's more possible than ever that he could play this Sunday. I'm telling you right now, do not be surprised. And I don't know, maybe they'll give him one more week to get him integrated. Maybe now, I'll tell you this. I bet you this week we'll start to hear Shedeur has more first-team reps with Tommy Rees now in charge. I guarantee you that. Because I think Jimmy Haslam is taking over now. I think he's seen enough with these guys. I think he's seen enough with the undersized quarterback in the 3rd round that doesn't look good on them right now. It looks like a terrible 3rd-round pick. Sean King, former NFL quarterback, said recently on the local airways here that it's arguably, I think he said, was it the worst 3rd-round pick ever or one of them? I mean, that's pretty bad. And the team looks like crap, and the fans are out of it. And they just put out all these ticket prices for the new stadium, and people are pissed because it's like, dude, you're telling us you want us to pay this much PSL money? I mean, we're looking at, if you guys didn't see it, if you had let's say, want to get 2 season tickets, right, for that new stadium coming up here in Brook Park in 2029, you would have to pay almost like $300,000 to get 2 tickets for 8 games in a season. Who the hell's paying that? What corporation's paying that to watch these guys right now? The team in the state of it's in? Nobody's paying that. But if that's what he truly wants to do, well, I think Haslam's got to make some moves. He's going to have to spice things up. You're going to have to show us something different, right? I think putting Shedeur Sanders out there, and if he, can pan out to be your franchise guy, that's certainly going to put a lot of people in the seats. Corporations are definitely going to buy tickets in because Shedeur, who's already generated Haslam over $300 million in revenue, he's going to get people watching and get you a lot of television games, and you're going to be putting asses in those seats. But I think it doesn't just stop there, right? Stefanski clearly does not like Shedeur. That's not his guy. And I don't think maybe doesn't dislike him personally, but it's just not his guy. And so I think, again, him handing off play calling duty today, I think Haslam's taking over now. I think he has him saying, okay, I'm done with this. I want to see what I got in Shedeur. Let's see what Tommy Rees can do as a play caller in the NFL, and we're going to move on. Get Shedeur ready. Shedeur's coming. If he doesn't start this week, I wouldn't be surprised if his first starts the week after. I'm telling you right now. And so that's my take on today's breaking news. Again, Kevin Stefanski handing off play calling duties to Tommy Rees. I think, to me, this says more about it's a bigger indictment on the analytics scheme. These 3 guys, like I call them, right here. I think it's over for them. I think today was the end of that because why would Kevin hand off play calling duties if his job was safe? And clearly, the things that I've showed you guys today, Kevin was only out there calling plays still, being on that sideline because he was adhering to a certain philosophy, which we heard from Tony Grossi, right? Remember that report? And so that I read to you guys earlier. And so, again, 2 years in a row, he gave up play calling duties. And then in the same day, we see this report from Tony Grossi. And so I don't think it's all coincidence, guys. I think we're going to see 12 out there. Perfect timing. I think we're going to see 12 out there very soon. Very soon. And I think the Browns are be looking at a whole new regime taking over after this season. That's what I think is going to happen. And I'm going to tell you a name right now that I heard over the weekend that I'm not saying isn't in the Browns' job. And Haslam may already be looking around. But one guy I would keep an eye on is Steve Sarkisian. Steve Sarkisian, his agent is Jimmy Sexton, right? Jimmy Sexton is in the close counsel. Haslam has a close counsel of people that he dialogues with, and they're very close to him. He asks he asks questions about the ownership, the Browns, and the Manning family, Jimmy Sexton, and I think it was Nick Saban, I believe, or Bill Parcells, excuse me. Those are the three people he asked. Those are like his group of people that he's very close with and he counsels with about everything. Well, Jimmy Sexton represents Steve Sarkisian. So, and there's been rumors about Steve Sarkisian. And I know from somebody who knows Steve very well from the LA area, because that's where Steve's from, that sounds like from the personal conversations they've had with him behind the scenes, from what I've gathered, allegedly, that Steve wants out of college because a lot of coaches want out of college right now because of the new landscape of the NIL and all the stuff they got to manage. Steve has NFL roots. That's where he started. He was a coordinator, I believe, in the NFL. He came up in the NFL. He's been in the NFL, right? And so that's a guy I would keep an eye on, is Steve Sarkisian. I mean, I think that's a guy, I think we'll be hearing his name. Because, again, I expect us to clean house. And that was Zach Jackson when I saw him say that last week. That to be said a lot. If he's starting to say it now, too, that they're going to have to clean house at the end of the year. Ultimately, I think the only thing that can hinder the Browns moving forward, because I think they do need to clean house, but if you're going to clean house, clean all of them out. Don't just clean out the two guys there, in the middle and to the left. You got to take that guy on the right there. He needs to go. 55, 99, and 1. And I believe that's what it was. I got that from last week when I had the champ on. Is this it right here? Yeah, right here. 56, 99, and 1 since hiring Paul DePodesta as Chief Strategy Officer in 2016. So, if you're going to clean house, you got to clean them all out, in my opinion. And whoever you hire and bring in, get football guys. Get guys that know what they're doing and that can actually build a culture and a franchise or proven. And maybe Steve Sarkisian, maybe that's the guy they want to bring. He's a college coach who understands kind of that culture, philosophy, and everything, but he's also an offensive guy with quarterbacks, and he's one of the best play callers in the sport. Maybe that's the guy they bring in. I don't know. I think it's a name I would consider because of the connections, and he's being really, really rumored right now that he's going to jump to the NFL. So I don't know. We'll see. But I think today, though, again, is one step closer to have some cleaning house at the end of the year. And I think one step closer to the Browns finally get back to being having hopefully somewhat of a competent franchise one day and respectable again. And we can get back to rebuilding this and getting us back to doing things the right way. Or I would say getting back, but doing things the right way finally. You know what I mean? And I think also the third thing, I think today we're getting real close now to Shedeur coming in there. Very close. If not this week, I'd say next week. So that's my thoughts on all this today. Shout out to all you guys. Raul, good to see you. He said, look under the flag. You may find, oh boy, but shout out to all you guys today. Like, subscribe, share all the good stuff. And I'll see you guys in the next one. I'm out of here.